bit darker, or switching up your coffee order tomorrow morning. Or just maybe there's someone somewhere that makes a move. A move that's morphed into a movement of millions that cling on to this transformation as their sole source of hope in this forever changing world. For years now, technology has been a prominent source for change. With this, and for the sake of countries less fortunate in the United States, I, Raquel, Reis, propose the question: in what ways will technological resources improve global advancements in agriculture for the betterment or worsening of developing countries? Since 1000 BC, technological trends in terms of the European and North American countries remaining dominant over Asian and African countries have remained the same. As the technology revolution has been progressing for decades, Joseph Paradiso and Gershon Dublin explain how technology is everywhere. Simple cranberry bogs in Massachusetts, USA can no longer just be cranberry bogs. Instead, they're an experimental plane, densely populated with sensor technology devices, a focal point of Dublin and Paradiso's MIT research that monitor every second experienced by the bogs. This proves to be very advantageous. However, developing countries are not among the beneficiaries of agricultural technology systems, and therefore we can look at them like an incomplete puzzle. Could it be possible that these tiny sensor technology devices are the missing piece we have been looking for? In the map here, you see the populations of undernourished people in developing countries. The darker the country, the greater the amount of undernourished people, leaving small countries such as Ethiopia as many as 35 million people undernourished on a daily basis. Now, some people are completely opposed to agricultural technology systems, and therefore they imply we should rely on these boxes of cargo as foreign imports are the best way to provide for these countries. In addition to this, certain health professionals object to the ideas of agricultural technologies due to incomplete research on them. However, when thinking of what is best for these countries in the long term, the technological advancements on agriculture that have been made in developed countries must be implemented in developing countries in order to increase their crop production, a factor which determines their way of life. Going into this will be biotechnology, sensor technology, and monetary evaluation. Biotechnology will be the initial step, a process which involves the genetic modification of crops using bioengineering. Dr. Antoinette Mannion and Stephen Morse, both professors at alternate universities, provide an example from India and China in which cotton farmers were introduced to biotechnology. In India, there was a 39% decrease, and in China, a 60% decrease in the use of pesticides. Due to these yellow flag signs that we see across lawns in the United States, we know how detrimental pesticides can be to both animal and human life. Therefore, by using biotechnology to decrease the dependence on these pesticides, the natural environment in these developing countries will be preserved and allowed to flourish. On the opposite end of the spectrum, the British Medical Association expresses their skepticism on biotechnology as its health effects on humans have yet to be examined. However, this is the British Medical Association, members of a very developed country that do not understand the immediate needs in terms of food of these countries. They fail to acknowledge the fact that genetically modified organisms, going back to the chart by Dr. Mannion and Morse, provide for yield increases, meaning that there are less losses in crop production, in China being a whole 8 to 10%, and in India a whole 31%, and with reduced losses, that means more food, therefore addressing the immediate health concerns of these countries. Now, going back to the positives, Martin Livermore, a biotechnology researcher, explains an example from Mexico in which scientists were able to alter the root contents of maize crops, allowing them to thrive in highly acidic soil. Now, just here in Africa, areas shown in red, yellow, and orange have this highly acidic soil, and also a popular staple crop of maize. Therefore, this specific biotechnology could be supplied to these developing countries in these areas in order to increase overall farm success. Now, sensory technology will be the next step in monitoring this biotechnology. To begin, Larrabee farms in California, USA have been thriving since 1918. However, as explained by Keith Larrabee, the farm's head farmer, they have not seen as much success until the introduction of sensor technology. With this, Denidis Moskovins of the Latvia University of Agriculture explains how intelligent technologies and systems with a specific emphasis on sensor technology allow for farmers to save both money and power as they decrease the excessive use of energy in agriculture. Although this information is limited to the select amount of developing world farmers that use energy-required tools, those that do are expected to experience immense benefits. Correspondingly, Reis Speak, a professor specializing in geodetic engineering, explains how sensor technology systems contribute to the measuring of air temperature and humidity, ambient light, volumetric moisture content in soil, and also provide recommendations for preventions, watering, and fertilizing. Now, with all these different applications in the farm, it is of no question that these sensor devices must move out of the developed countries alone and into the developing countries of the world in order to provide for these farmers. Now, as these are the poorer countries of the world, Monetary evaluation will be the third and final step. Luis Ruiz Garcia, a professor specializing in technologies applied to agriculture, explains how wireless sensor networks not only provide consistent monitoring and are effective, but they're also low in cost. Low in cost means that farmers can be able to afford more, therefore allowing them to densely populate their farms with their sensors, therefore increasing their complete understanding and awareness of their farm as a whole, rather than just specific plots of land. Also with this, we'll dive into the gross domestic products of countries. The least developed countries in the world are shown in yellow here. These countries are expected to survive off gross domestic products less than the estimated cost of the Iron Man suit. Because of this, Carmen Zuman Husov, a faculty of forestry at the University of Putra, Malaysia, explains how the use of international scientists and donors will be essential in this process. The donors will provide the initial funds needed to move these sensor and biotechnologies out of the developed countries and into these developing countries. Now, going back to those that oppose agricultural technology at the hands of imports, as we have been using this for years, there are certain pros to it. It provides the developing countries with something, and it's something for there is no chaotic change involved. Also, the reliability of developed countries is conveyed. However, there is limited to no technology introduction. Starvation is still a major issue. The countries are not taking advantage of available resources, and there are too much dependence on the developed countries, leading to long-term complications. Now, if my solution is implied, then the individuality of developing countries will be essential in order for them to make decisions for themselves, not based on the inputs of developed countries. In addition to this, the local and national economy will be engaged, and scientific advancement in the technology revolution will be worked on as a whole. Those last 2 points will benefit not only the developing countries, but also the world as a whole, as we are in a time where technological advancement is essential. In addition to this, the examples in this are limited to experiments, and this is a broad overview, therefore not addressing the specific needs of every developed country. Now, if the funds are initially provided, the biotechnology and sensor technology will be able to increase crop production in these countries. With increased crop production, farmers will not only be able to provide for themselves, their families, and their neighbors who are currently starving as I stand here today, but they will also be able to participate in foreign and national trade, therefore increasing their personal income and the gross domestic products of their country. With this technology introduction, there will be an increase in food and a decrease in starvation. Technology access will be provided, and there will be two-way benefits between the developed and the developing countries. As long as farmers in these countries remain picking crops with their hands, we as one must pick up the failure of previous technological leaders, including these countries in the technology revolution, and create that movement, the movement of millions.
How did you handle the differing perspectives in order to reach a conclusion?
I allowed the perspectives within my research to complement each other in order to increase my understanding of the topic as a whole. For example, in an article titled Sabina Exposo in her New Shoes, Hugh Grant is a global agricultural expert. And therefore, he has a different view as he is an outside perspective. He explains how once he saw the introduction of technology and experimental process in countries in South African countries, he was able to see how the farmers in these areas flourished. But he also touches on the perspective of a specific farmer, Sabina Exposo herself. And she explains how once biotechnology was introduced into her corn farm, she was able to produce more crops. And he provides a sweet example how she ran around town after getting this biotechnology, bragging about her new pair of shoes, and how that was her first pair of shoes she could ever afford. Therefore, I saw this through two different lenses. How an expert on the topic understands the way that these biotechnologies and sensor technologies overall can benefit these countries, but also how the people that will be using them themselves, the farmers in these countries, will be allowed to flourish as a result of this. In addition to this, by looking at this through the government perspective, all of the governments in developing countries that have been interviewed on this topic were very for these different technologies coming in order to increase their gross domestic product, as they are in charge of the entire federal economy as a whole, and therefore they just needed the funds and the kind of oomph to get it started.
What additional questions emerged from your research, and why are these questions important?
So, as I continued my research, and now as I come to a close, I come to wonder if other technologies, maybe nanotechnology and different technologies such as that, could be applied to these countries, if it would be a better or worse decision for these countries. This is important because it's essential for these countries who are now in need of great help to understand the best possible ways to increase their economies and the food available to their citizens on a daily basis in order to not only increase their gross domestic products and better the economy overall, but it's also for the sake of individual families, neighbors, friends that are undernourished on a daily basis due to a lack of resources. Therefore, if other technologies that I look to, if it were to be looked into, and if they were a better option, that would provide for better for these countries. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.